welcome you all here today. We're from Adam Smith International, and we're an international development consultancy based in Pakistan, but we've also worked in over 100 countries since 1992. We cover different sectors, including education, climate, economic reform, and also governance. And I don't think Ian would let me get away today without saying that Adam Smith is from Scotland. So just to point that out. Our panel today, we're looking at risks and opportunities and how AI can really help facilitate Pakistan's development sector. So I'm joined today by three really great panelists. And we will sort of look at how AI is actually could be an equalizer, not a polarizer, how we deploy these things ethically and responsibly, and to also do some myth busting as well on what AI really means in the sector. So first of all, I'd like to introduce my panel. So we're joined today by Anita Danialian. Anita is Head of Tech and Innovation at ASI, and she ensures that technology is applied in the right way across the international development portfolio. She draws on deep expertise in research and technical institutions and delivers advanced digital solutions working at the intersection of government, academia, SMEs, and industry. I also know that Anita has spent a long time working in Hong Kong as well and draws on her design and architecture expertise, and has also actually applied a lot of her knowledge to smart cities and transport as well. I'm also joined by Usman Khan, who's Director and Economist for the Technology for People Initiative Centre at LUMS, and he's also an advisor to the Federal IT Minister on investments. Usman also works with us at ASI. Usman has academic credentials from UCL and Cambridge, and along with the CFA Charter as well. And he brings over 2 decades of experience with global and local expertise in finance, trade, governance, and public policy. His career has spanned banking and investment in London and also in Pakistan. He has his faculty leadership at LUMS, and he's done advisory work across Bangladesh, Nigeria, India, and Pakistan. And he's done a huge amount of transformative projects in taxation, technology, and climate finance. And more recently, he's designed pooled fund structures for the National Disaster Risk Management Fund. And he continues to serve on many advisory boards and committees here in Pakistan. And last but not least, I'm joined by Omar Maniar. Mr. Maniar is a rule of law expert with over 12 years focusing on criminal justice reform and really focusing on improving access to justice for vulnerable groups across Pakistan. He's worked with Adam Smith International since 2018, and before that with the Legal Aid Society, and that's mostly on criminal justice reform initiatives. Mr. Maniar has also led the design and implementation of Pakistan's National Sex Offender Register, which was launched in 2024. It's a really, really important piece of work. And he also leads support to the government of Pakistan to improve Pakistan's response to online child sexual exploitation and abuse, including the development of a national policy for online sexual exploitation and the deployment of AI to identify child abuse cases as well. Mr. Maniar holds a BA and LLB from the Lahore University of Management Science and an MA in Governance Development and Public Policy from the University of Sussex. So just welcoming my panel here today. Anita, we're going to start with you and your focus here today. So you're going to debunk some myths around AI and really see this as an opportunity for the development sector and how it's an opportunity to leapfrog and not necessarily copy everything in the private sector, but really apply it to public problems and how it can be used in that space. So over to you, and really welcome hearing about your experience.
Thank you. Okay, I think I can speak in the mic. So basically, I guess the key point that I want to make is that I think AI has been overhyped as in being a high-risk scenario that is difficult to implement, that can have a lot of risks and result in like job losses and massive changes. But in reality, it's actually not that high risk. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding in its use and application. But basically AI, it's not magic. It's not replacing human judgment, and it's not a fixer-upper. It's simply a set of tools that help extract value from data. So AI is added onto a strong foundational data system to help basically generate better outcomes. And within our sector, where we're looking at the governance and stability and systems, it's primarily driving better efficiency and cost saving, but there's variations in the way that AI is used across different sectors and industries. And I think in health tech, like AI has been used in a really, really interesting way that actually helps save lives, right? So it's just in different industries, there's different use cases for it and the impact that it has. So therefore, AI in itself is not a solution, but it helps amplify whatever data systems you already have within our sector. So AI equals the algorithms plus the data plus the computing models to give you insights and predictions and automations. So AI is only as helpful as the quality of the data and the clarity of the problem it is applied to. So in government and development context, AI's, as I said, role is to help drive efficiency, decision-making support and service improvements. And it's not replacing government structures. It's not replacing humans. It's just there to help improve efficiency in the work that you're doing. And then I guess there's a few myths that I thought we could look at debunking. The first myth is that AI requires perfect data before you can use it. But in reality, waiting for the perfect data set will never happen. So you just have to start applying AI and then developing your data sets as you're going along. But what is really, really important in the application of AI in any situation is, why are you applying AI? What is your use case for AI application? And then it's looking at systems to be designed to improve data quality over time, right? The second myth is that AI is too expensive to implement, when in reality, modern AI tools, LLMs, low-code, no-code AI, APIs, you can get a lot of open source options, and it dramatically lowers barriers to entry. But the real cost is ongoing implementation, not the actual model itself. Good governance practices also help mitigate these costs by flipping the conversation from budget to planning. And then AI systems need to be maintained, so there needs to be regular updated data monitoring and governance systems to support it. There's another myth that AI needs to be added at the end once systems are built. But retrofitting AI onto legacy systems does not work. So if AI is introduced early on during design, requirement gathering and workflow mapping, it becomes a strategic accelerator, not a patch. So AI should, when you're thinking about the application of AI, it really, really needs to be led by strong use cases. What is your need for AI? How is AI going to improve what you're trying to achieve? And then design it right from the get-go. Like, don't be thinking about it in the middle of the cycle of the program. It needs to be thought right at the beginning. So unfortunately, there's a lot of development programs where this goes wrong and they leave digital and data considerations way too late. So retrofitting it doesn't really drive as strong impacts as it should, because it wasn't considered at the beginning. So AI, there's another myth that AI is too risky, and especially for the public sector. And I think I've touched on that, but risks arise from misuse, not from the actual AI itself. So mitigation frameworks, governance rules, ethical layers, strong procurement can all help create less risks than actual manual human decisions. And then I think this is a key one, and the last myth that I'm going to address, but AI will eliminate certain jobs entirely. So AI has definitely changed the job mix. It's reduced repetitive roles, it's created, but it's simultaneously created new ones. So an Oxford University Institute for New Economic Thinking report in 2024 highlighted that it actually created 1.7 times more jobs than it displaced. So in reality, that's about a 70% net increase in job creation. So I think it's also kind of good to touch on why AI matters within the government development institution sector. So AI is a chance for governments to leapfrog and not by copying the public sector, but by applying AI to public challenges. So again, it goes back to like really strong use cases, and this creates a lot of opportunities for the government development institution sector, but it drives greater efficiencies and gains in resource constraints, faster, more transparent decision-making, automation of manual tasks, better targeting of investment and services, and improved revenue mobilization and compliance. And stronger accountability. But there is a responsibility associated with AI whereby we must support public value, not private convenience. So governments must lead on safe, contextually relevant use cases. I think in terms of learning from international best practice, successful countries do not simply adopt AI, they build their enabling environments first. And I think this is a key example that I could pull up was on a project that I worked at within the UK, which was funded by the UK government to enable AI adoption within multiple sectors. And it was called Bridge AI. It was a £100 million investment from the UK Innovation Department. And it was delivered with a combination of different players. So it's always consortium led, but we had Alan Turing Institute and the Hartree Centre involved in it. But what it was, in a nutshell, was a challenge-led fund to support AI innovators to create sustainable and responsible AI solutions. And it did it through using the AI adopter communities, startups and industry adopters to integrate AI into their operations. And we developed AI adoption frameworks, which enable people better to understand how they apply AI into the work. So it's really kind of like building the foundational thinking before really fully embedding AI into your work. And it's creating frameworks for people to understand that. So I think there's a lot of like foundational work that can be done to help improve the application of AI. What I think is a key lesson out of everything through the work that I've done is about looking at the problem first. So challenge-led, not tech-led. Tech is not, don't go through your solution first, understand what your problem is, and then see how best to apply different options around, the tech space. So many development institutions make the mistake of starting with technology, but AI must be problem-driven, not opportunity-driven. So what you really need is clear use cases and a problem statement of what kind of available data you have. You need to understand that. What's your foundational readiness? How you're going to cost it and implement it? And what capacity and skills do you have to implement this? And I think the last kind of point that I wanted to touch on was a closing message, I guess, from everything that I've said in terms of what Pakistan needs to do to adopt AI in kind of a sensible manner. So AI is not here to replace people. That's 100% clear. It's here to empower them. So if we get the foundations right, AI can help Pakistan accelerate development, strengthen institutions, and deliver better outcomes for every citizen. So the priority actions for Pakistan are to start with the problem, not the technology, to invest in foundational data and interoperable systems, and then to develop the skills and the culture for digital governance, and then adopt phased, de-risked, challenge-led AI pilots, and to scale what works through sustainable national institutions, basically.
Thank you, Anita. That's really helpful. Great. Now we're actually going to talk about some of the practical applications and experiences that people have actually had in doing this. And we'll return to a bit of a discussion following that. So Omar, actually, I'm going to start with you. You've obviously been doing some of this work, but in quite difficult situations as well. And so it'd be really helpful to hear what the opportunities are, but some of the challenges that you face in taking these things forward.
Yeah, I think I can address some of that. And just to give you context, my work has been primarily with law enforcement agencies in Pakistan, right? So I'm applying that experience. And in hearing what Anita has laid out, I think, that's the positive part and that's the opportunity that we have. It's also giving me a little bit of anxiety because it requires a lot of our base structures, institutions, the culture of the public sector to change quite dramatically. And that kind of is what gives me a little bit of anxiety, right? So Anita mentioned that you don't need perfect data to get started, and I think that's accurate. And Pakistan has a lot of data in the public sector. But the cultural shift that I think we need to overcome is the willingness to open that data up and share that data. And to give you an example, I mean, we've struggled for years to get provincial government data flowing into federal databases, vice versa. The police won't share their, Punjab police won't share their data with Nadra. Nadra won't share their data without charging money with anybody else. And so when you think of how do I deploy AI, I think the fundamental question in Pakistan is, do we have access to a reliable data set at all? And I think globally, including in our AI policy in Pakistan, there's talk about how do you create standards for data so that they're interoperable and you can share data across the sector. The other thing I think Anita has rightfully said, is not to be solution-led. And so when you go into government institutions, AI is the buzzword. You get that sense at this conference as well, right? Everything is AI. But a lot of people don't understand what AI is meant to do. And so often, you'll walk into a government institution and they're like, oh, can we deploy AI? Without understanding why we want to do it. So it is quite buzzy. There are good applications for it. And so some of the work that we're doing with ASI and within the upscale program is I think it's a good example. So I'm going to be talking about this on the next panel as well, so please come to that. But Pakistan receives 1 million referrals of child sexual exploitation and abuse every year, right? So that is in the thousands every day landing at the desk of the National Cybercrime Investigation Agency. There is one guy there who has to sit there and manually look at these thousands of referrals of potentially horrific crime. And it's just not humanly possible to deal with that volume, right? And so that we are in the process of deploying AI to help triage some of that work. And it is, for us then, we're using AI to supplement the existing human capacity that's available. So there is still oversight. So there is a human being at the end that makes a decision about whether something is child abuse or not. But the AI can help kind of supplement that capacity by helping him navigate these thousands of data points. And so last year, for example, manually, Pakistan was able to open 800 out of the 1 million referrals that we got. And hopefully with the AI, we'll be in a place where Pakistan is at least reviewing all 1 million and then handing over to human systems to take that forward. So I'll stop there. So that the opportunities are there, but really, I think fundamentally there has to be a cultural shift on how we think of data. I'm happy to talk about that going forward as well.
Thanks, Omar. That's very helpful. And Usman, over to you. I mean, you've seen this kind of working, but also the challenges in a number, I think, of thematic areas, and can come at it both, I think, from a private sector perspective, academia, but also within government as well. So it'd be very useful to hear your experiences.
Thank you, Helen. And it's from the fear of, because I'm an economist by training, and also I've been lecturing for 2 decades now, so I like frameworks and putting things in perspective. So based on what Anita and my colleague Omar said, so 2 points that I want to talk about first. So one is, why do we need to look at AI any differently? Like if you look at evolution, there are continuous structural changes that happen in the world, right? And with every structural transformation, there are opportunities and there are lessons to be learned, or there are certain things. So after every structural change, there are winners and there are losers. And as long as the structural change increases the overall size of the pie, the overall benefit is positive than the cost, right? So we need to see AI as a structural change that is happening globally, which sort of is shifting the way people will behave, the way people will operate, the way people will work. And it's nothing different. So when we move from, let's take the example of agriculture mechanization, right? So agriculture mechanization eliminated a lot of base farm level jobs, but it does not mean that all of those people are out of jobs now or out of opportunities. But what is required is how we respond to those changes and how best we can actually enhance so that the overall impact is positive. If overall impact is positive, the net gain will always be greater. So I think that is one element we need to make that myth about that, it is going to eat up jobs. While it will eat up certain jobs, it will create a lot of more jobs as well. Because if it enhances efficiency, it increases the productivity, it increases, income, so there's going to be more opportunities. And then the second question in this particular framework or way of thinking is that how can we increase the number of winners and reduce the number of losers so the overall benefit is positive, right? So if let's connect with our daily lives, right? So there are three elements if you want to succeed, you should have. So first is acceptance about anything. The second is ability, and the third is the authority. So, we call this a 3A framework, right? So first you have to really accept that a change is happening. If you do not accept that, you're never going to be on the winning trail, right? So it's not that you leave all your careers and move into an IT career. It's not that. I mean, when I was taking a decision of my undergraduate, which was back in 95, that was a time when the dot-com industry was sort of rampantly going up, and all of my family and other people, as you know, in Pakistan, there's a culture of giving a lot of free advice, wanted me to move to computer science, but that was not a field that I ever wanted to study, right? I still wanted to stick to economics. But there are a lot of, now I do work a lot in IT sector, but as an economist, not as an IT professional, right? So first is the acceptance that a change is happening so that you have a mind to adapt to that change. Second, obviously, is the ability. So you need to work on the ability, because whenever there is change, you really need to retrain yourself. You really need to be becoming capable enough. And some of the ills that we see of the ethical use or the other issues that comes up with the use of more AI or the inappropriate use of AI is also lack of ability to really understand what it is telling. Because if you do not know what the algorithms behind the AI is, and you start pulling a lot of information with random prompts, then you're likely to be more misguided than guided by that, and that's a danger. So we need to work on the ability, and finally, it's the authority, right? So what is the authority that you have, and that's where I'll move on to the question on the policy, is to really use that into moving into that. So give you a very practical example under a program that we're running with ASI. It's called Revenue Mobilization Investment and Trade Program. So one of our fundamental areas of work there is to enhance revenue with working with the Federal Board of Revenue. All of you must have heard on the news, and because it's an endemic problem that we have, that the government keeps on taxing already the people who are already in the net. And while in our daily lives we see a lot of people having a very lavish life, but they're not in the tax net, and it's a very common founding here. And so there's a lot of anecdotal evidences. Now, one of the issues that we find, and what Anita said, solutions have to be problem-led, right? So in FBR, there are about 1,700 people who look at audit cases. And audit was done randomly, so that means if I'm a compliant taxpayer, the probability that I'll be selected for audit is the same as compared to someone who is non-compliant, right? So, and the cost on an officer to run an audit is the same whether a person is compliant or non-compliant. So that means if you even go by equal probability, if 50% of the people are compliant and 50 are non-compliant, that means we're spending the same resource wasting on 50 compliant taxpayers from where there is no gain or there is no advantage. So we actually looked into that, and that's a compliance issue. That's not where you could do anything else. And there's obviously human constraints. There are resource constraints as well. So we've developed this AI-based system which actually looks at data in a 360-degree angle. So it's not really restricted to anyone who's a taxpayer. It's restricted to any citizen of Pakistan. Obviously, we are initially restricted. Obviously, there are data limitations, right? So a person who has a CNIC, that 360-degree angle looks at whether you are purchasing cars, whether you have agriculture land, whether you have foreign trips, how many times you eat at restaurants, what is your credit card use, and then the AI system actually uses that contextualized data and maps it with your tax records and actually defines how an audit needs to be done. And in the last 6 months, when we have the trials, we've actually identified 500 billion rupees worth of anomalies in tax reporting. Now, that's a very powerful result of AI. If we were to use humans to do that, it would probably take 2 years, and those people would have probably left the country by then, right? So there are certain efficiency gains, but again, it depends. So what does this example tell you? So it's not a general algorithm. It was designed on specific data. We contextualized, we localized the AI solution, and it enhanced the efficiency that a work that would have been done in 2 years could now be done on a click of a button. So these are the efficiency indicators. So in all your lives, so my message to you is, you are probably at different points of your careers or different points. So see how you integrate AI. Don't take it as a primary learning tool, because you need to question what AI tells you as well. So use it to build your knowledge, but do not just rely on it as well. As you say, on a good Sunday afternoon in winter, there's no substitute to reading a nice book under a tree, right? So just do not think that AI is going to completely replace, because if you're going to do that, then your ability angle is always going to be limited. So I think so we really need to create a balance, and that's how whether it is policy making or doing everything daily, how to use it AI in your daily lives. I think that's the element we need to look at. I'll stop here, Helen. Sorry.
They're really, really good examples there. And yeah, quite amazing how you found further total taxable income and the probing through that, which is, yeah, really, really interesting. We're talking here about sort of creating a balance and obviously not letting AI replace sort of critical thinking and really needing to sort of apply that knowledge. I also wanted to go back to Anita and just actually ask about any sort of wow moments you had in some of your career when you've seen AI applied as well and done in a really good way, but also thinking about those ethical considerations and what might have been in place.
I mean, I think, again, the way that AI is applied across different sectors and industries really, really varies because it's the way that those sectors might be addressing certain challenges. So you could have the aviation sector, which is a high risk, really, really highly regulated sector. So the application of AI would be very, very different to that of, like, for example, in education, right? So a lot of, like, on the commercial side for most companies and most organizations, it's looking at AI applications internally for process improvements and efficiencies. But for me, like, when I look at, like, the maximum potential of AI, I always look at it within the health sector. Around 7 years ago, Google DeepMind developed an AI tool for retina scanning, and they applied this in India, in remote parts of India, to identify early onset, like before even type 2 diabetes has happened, to identify people at high risk, right? So that's one extreme of how AI can actually help save so much costs on health and lives, right? Versus AI for data optimization, for cost efficiency, for kind of making activities quicker, which is how most organizations are applying AI. And I think the way that AI should be applied, there's a very clear methodology in it. So from a science research background, they've perfected the methodologies for de-risking application of AI. And given the fact that most people fear data, it's always the first thing is like, I don't want to share my data is precious. The first approach in the design and implementation of AI always has to be data security led. So you have to assure the end user or the user that you're getting the data from that, security protocols are fully adhered to, GDPR, cybersecurity, all of these things are fully adhered to. And I think the beauty of AI is really when data systems start communicating with each other to kind of layer new information and give you more insights in a way that you weren't capable of doing. So interoperability is really, really vital in order to drive the impact of AI. But in terms of methodologies, companies, organizations, institutions across all the sector need to have absolute agility to do this. When you're developing and implementing technology solutions, you need to know that there are risks to failure and you need to be okay with those risks. So you need to create the environment that actually promotes those risks, promotes failure, because that's how you'll learn. And you have to fail fast to learn fast to make the right decisions, right? So there are applied methodologies that have been tried and tested, developed by academic institutions, applied by industries and research organizations that are completely scalable. AI cannot be added in the middle of an idea. It needs to be implemented from the get-go. Simultaneously to when you're developing a house, you have to understand, is the soil the right place to build it? What are the foundational requirements? What's the cost of it? How do we phase this development before doing it? It's the same thing with the application of AI and technology in any case.
Thanks, Anita. I'm going to move to Omar next. And I mean, you spoke quite a lot about some of the barriers that had happened in the space you were working in and around the sort of lack of data sharing in some cases. I just wanted to talk to you and get your ideas a bit more on what you think those cultural enablers are. So if you were to have your cake and eat it to make sure these things were to go forward, what are the sorts of things that you would want to see happening and hopefully are slowly happening as well?
I think, yeah, I'm going to be sort of the doom and gloom on this panel, right? But that, like I said, so there are some cultural changes that need to happen in the public sector. One of them actually is what Anita was also mentioning, which is you have to, if you're going to deploy AI, you have to factor in that it will get things wrong as well. And in the public sector, that does raise the risk quite a bit, right? So if you have AI that is helping you improve the identification of beneficiaries for the Benazir Income Support Program, for example, and it makes a mistake and leaves people off, for them, the impact is quite real. And so one, there is absolutely a need for good governance that can assess that risk in advance, and kind of catalog and mitigate against it. We spoke a little bit about sort of data, and not just the availability of data. It's data in Pakistan within the public sector is also often seen as a way to hold people accountable, right? And I think so when we look at data around the criminal justice system, and you have the Ministry of Law and Justice ask the Punjab police, how many people did you arrest? For the police, they're like, oh, I'm being asked this question, I'm going to be held accountable. But for AI to function, we have to change how we view our accountability mechanisms and how we feel about being held accountable. And so I think that's definitely something that'll have to change. We do have an AI policy. I think we haven't spoken about it on the panel yet, but Pakistan does have an AI policy. There's a big gap between policy and practice, and that tends to be the case everywhere, but arguably more so here. Some of the challenges are just also in availability of the technology itself, right? So in order to deploy AI at the Cybercrime Investigation Agency, we have to import one specific graphics processing unit. It's a GPU. And Pakistan, so there are technology companies in the world that will not sell that chip to Pakistan. And when you get into the kind of operationalization of that, you'll see countries as part of their foreign policy negotiating the supply of technology and equipment that enables their AI ecosystem and their AI infrastructure. We don't see that here in Pakistan yet. So even if we wanted to deploy sort of large language models that need the processing power, that need the data behind it, that need the electricity, that need the internet infrastructure, there's a lot of those gaps right now. And so at the policy level, we're quite sorted. But in terms of implementation, particularly when it comes to governance, that area still remains quite a big gap.
Thanks, Omar.
Sure.
I'm just going to Usman, thinking about those sorts of points. I think my question to you as well would be, obviously you've worked across sort of both sides of the divide there with public and sort of private sector. Are there any sort of areas we should be learning from the private sector or academia in this to apply to kind of public sector and development?
Yeah. So thank you, Helen. Just one point which I missed from my previous, and I'll add to that, which we were talking about the impact on jobs, right? So just using the FBR example again. So because the system has increased efficiency, I don't know if you read in the newspaper 2 days ago, FBR is now hiring 2,000 additional auditors to implement this. So actually, it has not destroyed jobs. It has actually created more jobs because there's more work to do, right? So coming to you, Helen, on that question, I think, and where the conversation is really going, whether it is the private sector, academia, or public sector, I think the danger is sort of, the third A that I had, which is sort of the authority, really. And, Umar mentioned about the policy. So, some of the dangers is where you try to restrict something artificially, and that is where you enter into an inappropriate use because you're trying to access something which is not really permissible, and you're not really getting the ability to train yourself. So basically, in terms of that, whether it is policy making in the private sector, public sector, or academia, I think the content use is really important. So for example, in my work, I do use AI quite a lot, but it's not sort of based on a general chat GPT algorithm where I'm trying to fetch everything that is available there. So I'm trying to contextualize what my problem is, what data set that I have, and actually feeding in new data as well. And some of the things that Umar mentioned as well, some of those, for example, before the AI policy came in, so there was a general tendency where AI was discouraged as a use of a policy instrument tool. But what we're seeing is that everyone, you can restrict them from using them in office, but not restrict them from using them at home. And there were cases where a lot of procurement documents, which were secret documents, uploaded on ChatGPT, right? Because people were not really aware. So, the other A that I referred to, which is the ability to use that, I think whether it is academia, whether it is private sector or the government, is really important. And now you see more and more universities are making AI as a logical research tool, as long as you reference it appropriately, you reference the use appropriately, and you do not use it to write your basic draft. You can use it to sort of, even I think in most universities now, you can use it as a language editor, you can use it as a vocabulary editor, you can use it, because those are strengths which are actually enhancing your skill. Because if you have the basic knowledge, and especially in context of Pakistan, right? So English is not our first language, and a lot of people, I presume, here belong to the schooling fraternity, right? So from the time that I was a student till now, and because I teach a freshman course at LUMS, the difference between in terms of language skills is massive. So if we really start to use AI to polish those skills, because if you keep using them, human mind is more adaptive than AI, right? AI's adaptability is dependent upon how much we want AI to adapt. We are more adaptive. I mean, look at the evolution of humans, right? So believing in whatever earlier human theories are, but still the learning curve is very higher over an aggregated period of time. So I think that's very important. And I think even private sector is using it. For example, companies are now using it, bigger MNCs for tracking their inventory. And also their sales. So, so because it's, retail space is becoming more and more expensive. So they're using these AI tools to really inform them in terms of what should be their in-time inventory management system. So even to the detail that if number of soaps on the shelf reduced to X number, then Y number of soaps should be moved immediately to that shelf. So that is actually increasing sales, it is increasing efficiency. And again, as I said, it's not reducing jobs, because if you're moving to more specific inventory management, maybe you need lesser people at the back end, but you need more people on the shelves, or alternatively, right? So while it displaces something, it also creates more space. So I think we should not be wary in terms of that. Neither we should be, as a policy instrument, restricted, and that's why I'm quite positive that the AI policy from the government is the right signal, that we should make it open. We should make it as when computers came in, for example, right? So because I belong to the banking industry, banking was all manual ledgers, right? So shifting from a ledger to a completely IT-based system in terms of recording finances, there was a big trust shift, because everything was written and now everything was stored in a system. And, if I'm depositing my gold, if I'm depositing my currency, I need to have the assurance of the bank. So that shift also came. This shift is even smaller than that transition. It's just that because that was way back in history, we've forgotten about that. So I think this is more adaptive. And as I said, that we need to keep control in our hands. And as last statement, as an economist, you always find the best optimum solution the more certainty you have. And I think the only way to be more certain is to be more informed and be, more learned about it. And that will only come if you're more open to learning and not restrictive.
Yeah.
Can I come in on the policy side? Because I feel like policy, great, you're tick listing, you're kind of, I've got guidance on this, but in reality, translating policy to delivery on the ground is what's a huge challenge. So I think there needs to be strategies in how you implement that policy from a written document into practical delivery. And it needs to be supported holistically with an AI and data strategy. And within that, you need to look at what's your existing capabilities for your employees or whoever's using and adopting these AI policies to implement it, and what's their shortfalling. So what do you need to upskill them on, and how can you best do this? So, for example, the UK developed a national data strategy, but we realized it was really fragmented in the sense that it was just looking at it from a very high level government perspective, and it wasn't really looking at data sets from the market. For example, startups, they have mass amount of data sets. Anyway, we noticed that there was a gap around this space. So we came up with a way of like strategizing in how do we increase the data connection from market back to government. And one example of how we did this in practical terms was when I worked for one of the local authorities within the UK, we actually developed data fellowship programs, whereby we implemented a data champion. We created a job spec for them, so we knew exactly what kind of a role they needed. We went to market, we hired that person, we implemented that person in-house, and we drove upskilling from bottom up as opposed to top down. So the intention is that people learn from having a champion, from having someone that they can easily go to and say, well, I'm struggling over here. How can I best approach this? It's more tangible. So policy is very high level and it is needed to shift change. However, how do you practically trickle that change down? And it needs to be done bottom up, I believe. So I think we need to look at it from both perspectives.
Thanks, Anita. I've got a couple of questions here from the audience as well. So given we've got 16 minutes left, I'll start asking those, and I might have one for you at the end as well. One of the questions that came up, more than 50% of our country's population lives in remote areas. When these students are educated and they come from government schools and colleges and then move into private universities, they are blasted by AI. How will they cope with this situation? Usman, I'm wondering if I give that one to you to start off with.
So, yes, two responses to that, Helen. So first, I think we also, in my practical experience and what I see now, because as I said, I teach at LUMS and we have a very wide NOP program as well, where we do select students from a wide variety, and other work that I do with government. There's also a bit of a myth on this as well. In fact, from a skills perspective, there was a Punjab-wide test that we did through Technical Vocational Education Centre, TEFTA. And surprisingly, the students from the remotest area of South Punjab actually scored the highest on that test. And it was basically an AI-based test. So when we say that 50% are in remote areas, that's again, based, as I said, on a broad-based understanding, not on specific information and specific knowledge set that we have or a specific data set that we have. And that's the danger of AI as well that we've been discussing. So I think one, we really need to understand, and the other topic is when you talk about the digital divide, right? Whether it is in terms of gender, whether it is in terms of reportness. So obviously, Pakistan is a country of above 250 million people. And again, when we talk about equity or equal distribution, it's not possible because the resource set is not that. But I think from a policy perspective, what we really need to do is to create pathways. But we also need to see that what this technology has done and the promulgation of the use of mobile phones and data, which has substantially increased in the last few years, is that at least the knowledge barriers are now breaking up. I mean, look at the most highest earners on TikToks or all of these videos. They're not from mainstream cities. They're all from remote cities of Pakistan. So that actually tells you that the penetration of that access is not a problem. What the problem is that whether that access is being used appropriately or not. So whether that capability is being built where all of this access is being used positively, or whether it is being used negatively, because that will become a bigger challenge. And, we talk about, and I see a lot of youth in this room as well, which will be the biggest cohort in our population. In 2030, we'll be about 150 million people, young people in the economy. And, in policy circles now, I do not talk about the economic dividend of this youth or social dividend of this youth. I talk about the political dividend, because, this youth will be the voters of future. And it will actually define what we see as leaders of tomorrow. So the political dividend is really important. And if that capability gap remains and these decision makers are not trained, so it's not about access to IT or anything, it's more about whether the ability to select appropriately is there or not, we will have a bigger challenge. So a much bigger challenge than economic challenge. while I'm an economist, I feel that most of our policy debate is captured by economic issues. But I think our real issue is about youth and how we really train them moving forward, because that's what will contribute to improving the economy, not the other way around.
Thank you.
Can I
Omar,
just-
yes.
Yeah, coming in on that, we saw this with with smartphones and kind of people shifting from, say, mainstream news channel to getting their news and their opinions in this echo chamber. And I feel like with the youth now, and we're hearing these kind of horror stories of young people and their interaction with ChatGPT, and the belief that this is a friend, or this is, there are romantic relationships reported. In fact, ChatGPT, I think, is now encouraging romantic conversations with kids as young as 12 or 14, right? And so we do have to engage with the youth, but I think in a way that's also aware of how the youth will see an AI-produced output, whether that's a video, which is now getting more and more real. I think the chances of misinformation and sort of social engineering are significantly higher. And so we do have to equip the youth to be able to navigate that in a way that maybe I don't understand, because my generation has seen that transition of print to electronic to internet to now entirely sort of social media based. And so I'm still maybe skeptical of a video, but with the younger generations now, it's I think that's a risk that we need to be alive to.
Thank you. Anita, anything from you on this, or shall I move to the next question? Right. The next one is, as a classroom facilitator, students often find an easy escape seeking help from AI where it is just to facilitate. But how can we teach students that we should just use it for guidance and not for cheating? And I guess I'll add to that it's not just in the classroom, because I think you can use it for job applications. We obviously work in the donor space. We would put in proposals. We don't, but if we wanted to, you can use AI a lot for those things. So I think it's throughout and how we sort of use it for guidance. I'm going to ask that to Anita first and then go through.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Again, I'm not far off from Omar's age. So in terms of the transition from analog to digital, when I was at university, we didn't necessarily have access to these facilities. And it's really interesting to see how academic institutions have been implementing the use of AI. There are programs that actually have been designed, coursework that has been designed to be using AI. But there's also clear rules and regulations in the way that, like, there's citations, there's ways that you have to reference its use, there's places that you cannot use it. It depends on the way that the course has been designed, from what I understand, which I found really interesting. And then also they've got like a lot of AI training, and like they've got AI hubs academic institutions do, that students can go there and get further training and stuff. I don't think that AI is, like, it would be silly to say that AI is making us lazy and it's making us cheat. It absolutely isn't, for the simple reason that it's a reality. Everyone's going to use it. If you don't jump on that bandwagon, I mean, you should be living in 1920, right? Like, we're living in this day and age. We need to embrace what's happening, and it's the reality of it. And, that it's gonna just be accelerating further. So in reality, we need to address the challenges and think agile and in creative manners of how we incorporate that within our work, and where we put the boundary and say, no, in this case, when you're we want you to think critically and independently. And, people will adhere to that because those requirements are put in place. You know where to apply it because you've been asked for it, and where not to. That was kind of my insights from digging a bit deeper in how AI has been used in academic institutions versus a period of time when in my university degree didn't have it. So I found it really insightful.
Good. Omar, Usman?
Yeah, I can add one. So I think, and again, teaching a freshman course at university as well. So I think the way to really address it more practically, again, is the same that I said. You have to be one step smarter, right? So one, you do not have. So where does the concept of cheating comes in? It comes in when you restrict it. So you should not restrict it, but you should guide it the way it should actually be used. And then your testing instruments should be such that, you can actually, so my exams for the course before even AI has always been open book. So now I'll make it open AI as well. It doesn't really matter because, the questions that I'm asking, I know cannot be answered through AI. They can guide them, but, and then also the ability of the teacher on the side, because there's a more specific question really to assess whether the answer is AI generated or not, right? So it's ability on both sides. But I think my one line message again, Helen, is, because we're running short of time, I think a gun in the right hand and the wrong hand makes a lot of difference, right? And that's how we need to approach it, you know.
I think I'm just going to add two quick things to that, right? So I remember when cell phones became popular, and now they're everywhere, I remember thinking, oh, I don't remember anyone's phone number anymore, right?
Yeah.
Right? I think we've all been through that, but the question is that really an important skill? Should I have the skill or the ability to remember a phone number? And back then it was shocking that, oh, we're losing sort of our brain capacity because now we don't have to do it. So that's one thing. I mean, I have a 4-year-old who's in school now, and amongst the parents, there's a conversation. Should we teach our children cursive writing anymore in a digital age? Right? Is that a skill that we need to have? And so absolutely, I think as technology changes, the question is what you really need to continue to teach children. And I think Anita said this right, which is you have to make sure they understand critical thinking. But then there are, of course, skills that maybe we don't need going forward.
Thank you. I don't know if I'm allowed to break the mold and see if anyone wants to put their hand up and ask a question. Otherwise, I can ask a final one for the panel. Yes, Aisha, go for it. See.
Thank you. I think you guys know, since we work together, that I come to this question from more of a human rights perspective and a human rights background. And this is a question more directed towards Anita, but curious for everyone's thoughts. You spoke a lot about taking a risk-forward approach and learning through trial and error. But how do you approach that when AI is being used to automate really, really important decisions, like what Omar mentioned about BISP and social protection? That's someone's entire livelihoods. Or we've seen AI used recently, like in warfare. That's literally a question of life and death. So how do you reconcile this perspective that's, you know, being championed from like the tech world and Silicon Valley with the fact that, you know, people's entire lives can be ruined?
I mean, it's very kind of like Armageddon. Sorry, but it's so basically, let's start from I think your question has a twofold approach, right? The first is the data. So when data is captured, there's always a bias in the person who is documenting that data source right from the beginning. So you need to make sure that data biases are removed, okay? Secondly, when you're dealing with data and you're dealing with critical thinking and like serious decision making, which can have life or death implications, there's the concept of human in the loop, right? Where actually a human steps in to validate that data, make the decision. It's not cognitively done by the machine. But again, there'll be bias in that person's decision making, but we can't block that. Like that's how the world works, human interaction, decision making. And then the third thing about like that agility that is required for the development of technologies such as AI and its application. And I said earlier that there's methodologies in place. There's such things called the skunk work model. And they're basically systems that sit outside of business as usual, and they've got their own teams who work with agility and flexibility and speed with awareness that things can fail, and we're going to be absolutely okay with that failure. So there's these different kind of strands that we need to put alongside each other in order to help de-risk it. Nothing is perfect, but I think that this is the right approach to it. So being cognitive of the data sources, the biases within data documentation, having a human in the loop to cut that kind of decision making based on its importance and its risks. And then number 3, having the right environment to carry this out that is not restrictive to business as usual guidelines. I hope that answers your question.
Just one point, I should more on that. I think it's also to look at it because, again, the whole discussion is that it's an aid, right? So decision is still in the hand of a human. And also the question that you asked, so in terms of policy work, we see a lot of data and statistic. So for example, let's take loss of life, right? So loss of life is a statistic as well as the consequences are very different. So someone loses life due to, let's say, lack of nutrition or lack of water on the development side I'm talking about, or act of war, or a natural cause of death, right? So does the system or the algorithm take loss of life as a statistic or actual consequences of that? I think that's also really important, because that's how it will actually guide you. And the questions that you ask from a humanitarian perspective, that is the system really understanding the consequences of it or taking it as a statistic? I think that difference is really important. But a completely different example, driverless cars work has been there for ages. Why do we still not see a lot of them? Is because still in driving, there are certain decisions that cannot be trained, which maybe, a human maneuver is still better than an AI maneuver. Otherwise, we would have seen a lot more progression on driverless cars as we see today. So I think there is more adaptability in humans, and I think we should really work on our ability as humans to do that and use AI as a tool, not just as signing it off to it completely.
I have one more question from the audience. So thank you, Wakil Khan, from this. This is about what policies are needed to make AI support Balochistan's development, especially in education, governance, and economic inclusion, despite limited digital infrastructure.
So I can answer that.
Yeah, we're looking to you for this one.
So you see, so again, before AI policy or any policy, I think what we need is a policy based on balanced growth. Why do we need to go even to Balochistan? We can just look at Punjab. If we look at the public investment spending in Punjab, we'll see a very highly skewed structure where a lot of investment is in Lahore and a couple of other cities, and then it substantially goes down. So the fundamental change of that policy shift is how does the resource shift actually happens? And you don't need an AI to actually guide you on that. The deprivation is very clear. But then also you really need to understand, because when it comes to public policy decisions, a few years back, we were working with Punjab government when the decision on the Punjab Kidney Liver Institute was being taken. Now, the question was, do we invest X billion in a hospital, which is a specialized hospital, or in which cost we can actually make 5 general hospitals? But again, the question was what even Aisha asked earlier, how do you classify a loss of life? Because Kidney Liver Institute, you'll have all cases that will be life-saving elements, whereas a general hospital is you treat a lot of people for general illnesses, which may not have a life-saving consequence. So these are tough policy decisions. So when we talk about Balochistan, yes, it is deprived, but then we also need to see that it also has the lowest population. It also has the largest fragmentation of population. So when you start to distribute the resources, what is the cost? So, while there are other governance and substantial issues, this policy making is not easy. And that's what I've been trying to say, that when we try to use AI, it has to be contextualized in the local problem. You cannot ask AI that AI will give you a generic policy for Balochistan that, you enhance access to education, you spend on health. All of us know that. We don't need AI to tell us that. But why it is not really happening, I think that's a very tough question for which we really need to problem solve it rather than just take general guidance. So I think that's my response to that.
Thank you. I'm conscious we are out of time, so I just want to say thank you to the panelists today, and thank you to you all for coming and participating. It's great to see such great turnout here. So thank you again.